I spent 1,000 hours playing each of the 14 weapons in Monster Hunter World to make this tier list. I completed the 100-hour weapon challenge with all of them, a challenge where I started a brand new character with nothing, beat both the base game and Iceborne campaigns, then went into the Guided Lands and cut the tails off every monster in the game, or broke the horns and faces off every monster in the game with the blunt weapons. I did this because I wanted to learn all the weapons, but the other reason was just to make this video. I wanted to be one of the few creators here on YouTube who actually spent a substantial amount of time with every weapon and then ranked them against each other based on some data and experience. Over a year ago, I made a video ranking all the weapons as a player who's never played the weapons before. I took each weapon through a series of hunts with basic gear and no armor skills just to give them a try and rank them based on how they felt. Here's what the tier list looked like at the end of that video, and boy howdy, this list has changed a lot after spending time with each of the weapons. So let's get into it. A project that took over 1,000 hours and a year of live streaming and editing to finish. Here's my weapon tier list for Monster Hunter World and Iceborne. Let's define what this tier list is all about real fast. Each weapon will be ranked on 3 factors: how fun it is to play, how hard it is to learn, and how strong I feel it is based on the weapon challenges I did. And just so you're sure there's no bias here, I'm going to rank all the weapons in a random order. Dual Blades. This is the weapon I completed all the content in Monster Hunter World and Iceborne with first. I was able to learn the weapon very quickly and was excited to be able to dodge and get around without much of a hassle. The short range can be tough, but in my experience has made playing all the other weapons a lot better since I started with the shortest range weapons and things only got easier to hit. I advise people to start with the Dual Blades as their first weapon because of how easy they are to pick up, and they're so much fun. You get into flurries of attacks with massive amounts of damage racking up over the millions of hits without much risk because of your fast dodge animations and speed time. There's really nothing to worry about. Over time, the Dual Blades started to feel very samey to me. They're a very fun weapon, but there were others that excited me more to pick up and play. A rank. Heavy Bowgun. Heavy Bowgun has been a weapon I've heard about throughout my entire Monster Hunter journey, and it was also the weapon I was most concerned about doing the 100-hour challenge with, because I didn't think I'd be able to finish it. But that was completely false, as Heavy Bowgun chewed through the campaigns, and the slicing ammo build for chopping tails worked all right. The spread ammo builds with this thing are insanely strong, and I was very surprised at how good tanking up and going shield mods and guard skills was. Overall though, I just didn't find Heavy Bowgun super fun. The damage is immense, but the gameplay is very lackluster. I was surprised at the damage output and safety, but near the end of the game, I was looking at chat more than the monsters when hunting them. You just stood there and left click, and that wasn't the most fun for me. F rank. Longsword. Oh, Longsword. The most popular weapon in Monster Hunter, and now I understand why. The stories of how busted this weapon is ended up being a reality for me. I learned the weapon super fast, crushed both World and Iceborne's campaigns faster than I ever had at the time, and scoffed at the hardest hunts of the game, including Raging Brachydios and Elatreon. Elatreon is definitely where reality hit, and I didn't feel as strong as every other hunt. This was likely due to my gear though. I think I would have had no problem taking Elatreon down with the proper endgame setup. The Longsword has always been a weapon that many monster hunters enjoy, and I'm getting into that same boat. There's a reason why it's popular. It looks awesome, you feel great playing it, the counterattacks are very satisfying, and it slaps real hard. A rank. Gunlance. Being on YouTube making Monster Hunter content means I'm gonna hear the name Rurikon, and that name is always connected to the Gunlance. There was a ton of hype around the 100-hour Gunlance challenge within my viewers, and I'm pretty sure Rurikon had something to do with that. I do think that this hype may have set my expectations about the Gunlance higher than it needed to be. Gunlance is the definition of clunky, and I'm just not somebody who enjoys the clunk. The weapon was a little difficult to learn, but once I got into mastering, I had it mostly figured out, and I enjoyed the normal shelling quite a bit with the combo explosions. The Wyvern Stake is incredible. I hope more weapons do similar systems to this in the future. Having a spot on the monster to aim for to get big payoffs is way cooler than hitting buttons in a certain pattern to get a cool looking attack. And you can hold your ground, sure, but when those monsters move, it was like nails on a chalkboard for me to try and get close to them again for some damage, only to have the monster run away again. I see that Monster Hunter Wilds has changed the weapon quite a bit, so I'm interested to give the Gunlance another go around to see if I can shake off the clunky feelings and get to blowing the face off of monsters. F rank. Sword and Shield. The old sword and board, and an interesting outlier in the Monster Hunter weapon lineup. Who would have thought a reasonably sized sword and shield would fit in the roster of oversized weapons slapping giant monsters? I had high expectations for the sword and shield going into my 100-hour challenge with them, and those expectations were met and exceeded even. It's amazing what all this little weapon set can do, and in the hands of somebody who knows this weapon well, monsters ain't moving. I really liked all the options Sword and Shield has for stopping a monster in its tracks. Knockouts with the shield, mounts, easy access to items like traps due to the fast sheet speeds, and good old topples from carving up monster feet. And this is just the bare bone essentials of playing the weapon well. You can do so much more if you feel the need. I've got a really fun mushroom dancer and wide range setup that does all these things and keeps my teammates alive by force feeding mushrooms to them all, and it works really well. The perfect rush is about the only way to deal damage with the sword and shield, and it's my only reason for not ranking this weapon higher. The weapon would end up feeling repetitive to me in the long run, as my entire hunt was going for perfect rush, hoping to land the long combo. There's nothing wrong with this, it's just not that engaging for me the longer I've played this weapon. B rank. Lance. I'm not sure what it is about my community, but there's a lot of Lance players around here. I heard about Lance so much leading up to the 100-hour challenge with it, and everyone kept telling me, Tails, you're never gonna believe what the Lance could do. And they were right. I was absolutely shocked at what the Lance could do. My initial impression of the Lance was that it was a blocking weapon with a 3-hit combo, and that was it. I ranked it as the worst weapon on my first impressions video, and you'll be happy to know that Lance isn't the bottom of the list anymore. The Lance was surprisingly strong. I made incredible time through World and Iceborne's campaigns, with a mild damage fall off right at the beginning of Iceborne. The fact that you have 2 or more counters in your set that essentially nullifies every monster attack is insane. With enough guard and guard up in your build, there's maybe 7 attacks in the entire game that can hit you through your shield. And your shield isn't just a block, it's a counter attack, meaning if you block with the block attacks instead of just holding the guard button, you get a super fast hitting counter hit that you can follow up on. One thing I was worried about with the Lance was mobility, as the gun Lance was like walking through molasses. But the Lance actually has a lot of mobility options to get you back into the fight and chase monsters down. The only downside to Lance for me was the repetitiveness. Seems to be a theme here. Once you figure out the counters, the entire hunt is counter, poke, poke, poke. And that just isn't fun for me. Yes, the damage is incredible. Yes, you aren't going to cart, but it was way too safe for me and took the engagement and risk of the hunt out of the game for me. I'm just not made for the tank lifestyle, but if you love being a tank, you need to play Lance, because this was the most safe way to play Monster Hunter that I had. C rank. Charge Blade. The very first 100-hour challenge that I live streamed and made into a video. I picked this weapon up after Dual Blades because I thought the transform from sword and shield to huge spinning axe was so cool. I had read all the posts online saying that Charge Blade is complicated, but I was up for learning, and I wanted to have a weapon that took some more brain power than Dual Blades. And the difficulty spike between Dual Blades and Charge Blade was insane. I still don't know everything Charge Blade can do, and I spent a couple hundred hours with it now as I kept trying to learn more after my 100-hour challenge with it. But despite how complicated the weapon is, Charge Blade is peak hunt engagement for me. You have multiple mini games you're trying to achieve while hunting a monster, and those mini games give you an array of options to use to take the monster down. This is by far the hardest weapon I learned, but it's so much fun to play. Landing the super amplified elemental discharge is one of the most satisfying feelings of the game, and once you get to the point of using guard points effectively, you feel both immovable and unstoppable at the same time. True masters of this weapon, which I want to be eventually, can guard everything and lay down the damage at the same time. I've still got a lot to learn, and that's going to keep Charge Blade at the top of the list for me for a long time. S rank. Bow. I need to apologize up front to a lot of people for this one. I'm sorry. I just don't get it. Miss 5,000 watts? I'm looking for some help someday to figure this weapon out. The bow was another very hyped up weapon when I got to the challenge. There are many bow fans out there who are telling me that this was going to be a breeze and that the bow's insane, and with how much I like and know how to use the dual blades, I'd pick up the bow no problem. Well, that wasn't true. I see the similarities to bow in terms of stamina consumption, but that's pretty much it. It might be that the 100-hour challenge isn't kind to the bow, because running raw damage with high affinity is kind of how I need to go about the challenge, since I don't have time to craft 5 sets of gear for each element in the game. Or it may be that my brain can't wrap my mind around how close range I have to play for very little payoff in damage. And if I get hit, I get demolished by the lower defenses ranged weapons have. Each shot felt like I was barely scratching the huge HP pools of the monsters I was hunting, and I knew I could tenderize the monsters, it would help, but Bo took 2 tenderized attacks to wound the monster, and it wasn't the fastest tenderize ever either. I will say that it was very satisfying to cut the tails off every monster of the game with the Dragon Fixer. That might have been the most fun part of the bow for me. And I do think that if I was making a proper endgame setup with elemental bows, I would likely have a better time. But that's something I'd have to commit 100 hours to in order to create, and that's just too much of a time commitment to get me into bow. F rank. Switch Axe. The Switch Axe was a weapon that I put on a pedestal before I got to the 100-hour challenge with it. I loved how the weapon looked. The attacks with it were so stylish, and to me, that made the weapon a blast. I want to look awesome hunting and be contributing to a hunt in a meaningful way. The Switch Axe does both, and that made for a very enjoyable time through the challenge and beyond for me. I'm a huge fan of the sword mode on Switch Axe. Every attack in that mode is sick, and the added file damage is a fun way to add to the hunt with the different effects you can tack on it. I have a build that does both exhaust and sleep damage to monsters, which allows for some hilarious hunts where the monster falls asleep maybe 4 or 5 times each hunt, and the monster will attack slowly for portions after you've exhausted a bunch. I have more to learn with the axe mode, but the fadeaway slash and dodge rolls with the evade extender make you feel like you're flying across the battlefield. It's super mobile, and every hit, both in axe and sword mode, is something like 200 damage in endgame. It's pretty crazy how much damage this thing can dish out for almost no commitment. And then you've got everyone's favorite, the zero-sum discharge. And funnily enough, this was the part of the Switch Axe I could do without. Pulling it off for the first time was cool, but it's a pretty lazy way to play Monster Hunter in my opinion. Ball the face and mash a button for 15 minutes isn't very fun for me, so I just don't do it. But it's effective, and I get why people do it, because zero-sum discharge does so much damage. The Swag Axe is a fitting name for this weapon, and I'm very happy with my time playing it. A rank. Hammer. Oh, Hammer, the weapon I ended the entire 100-hour weapon challenge series with, and I'm glad that I did. I really liked stopping monsters in the tracks using traps, paralysis weapons, and with the Hammer, good old concussions. The learning curve of the Hammer was really interesting in my time playing it. It started as a really easy weapon, but a run-in with high rank and what I thought would be an easy weapon became a lot harder. But just a little more time and I finally figured it all out, and now this weapon is pretty sick. It reminds me so much of Dual Blades, but in bludgeoning form. Stay safe, dodge away, and counter with big hits. Despite how much fun I had learning the Hammer and knocking out monsters, the novelty started to fade, and what was left was a weapon I felt was very slow. And I'm not a big fan of slow weapons. The Hammer charge became obsolete for me in Master Rank because of how slow you moved around while holding the charge button. But the attacks from the charge are so good, so it was hard to give up. I didn't like the split between charge and no charge. Plus the knockout, though fun, weren't as fun when you've knocked every monster down for the entire game. Instead of it being a big bonus, it felt like something expected, less of a prize. Ultimately, the thing that's keeping me on Hammer is the sliding attack. I really like spinning like a madman with a hammer flying around and smashing monsters in the face. That to me is pure fun. If there was a guaranteed slope on every area to hunt, I'd play Hammer more just to slay every monster with that attack. It always gave me a laugh, the damage is decent, the surprise mounts were a nice perk, and it made the weapon feel really fun. B rank. Hunting Horn. I'm so glad this weapon isn't a meme. It feels like one when you're looking at it, but then you land that knockout on a monster's face while dancing away buffing your team. Dang, it's a dream. It's so fun. And after meeting Uno Hunter, the Hunting Horn only got better. Make sure to check out this Hunting Horn master. His gameplay is a work of art. The Hunting Horn is commonly referred to as a support weapon from people who've never played it before. Hunters don't fall for it. The Hunting Horn is an aggressive beatdown that sounds incredible while knocking the lights out of monsters. The buffs are just icing on the cake. You'd be just fine without the songs. The face is the place with your instrument of choice. Not to mention you're rocking the highest move speed with an unsheathed weapon just by playing the self-improvement song, which is found on every horn in the game. So you've got mobility, strong auto attacks, and a ton of slugger. And let's make it even better. If you bring Hunting Horn into a party, everyone loves you. There's nobody out there that hates a Hunting Horn player that buffs their team and fights the monster. It's basically the perfect weapon for hunters who want to crush monsters and be noticed for it. There was only one problem I had that could be changed if I had more time to play in the end game with it. The damage fall off when playing solo hits right around the end of Iceborne campaign, and tempered monsters end up being a slog due to the high hit point pools of these monsters. The combos for the horn aren't very deep, and with inflated hit points on monsters, the hunts could go a little longer than I'm up for. But all this doesn't matter if you're in a party. Your damage buffs makes your team super strong, and they'll be able to pick up where your damage falls off. And don't let this make it sound like a support weapon now. It's still a huge beat stick, but hunt times just get longer against harder monsters, and most of my time with the horn was playing solo. B rank. Insect Glaive. The only thing I knew about Insect Glaive going into the weapon was that I could get a ton of mounts on every hunt. And then I started playing the weapon and found out that it actually does a ton of damage when you're using the attacks on the ground instead of flying around the entire hunt. And I really liked this. It was way more fun to play the Insect Glaive grounded and spinning all over the place doing stupid damage all the time. In my run through the game, the Insect Glaive set speed times through World and Iceborne, and not by a small amount. And I don't want to eat up all my time with this, but I have to bring up my big problem with the weapon. The insect part of the glaive is not fun for me at all. Having to tag monsters in 3 different places to have your bug grab buffs is such a lame mechanic in my opinion. And it's not like you can even play without them. The buffs provide damage, regen, defenses, speed, and even new movesets for every attack. Playing the insect glaive without the buffs is an entirely different weapon and experience, and it was made to be worse than the buff version. And it wasn't like I had to collect the buffs once. That might have been more acceptable. But those buffs wore off every couple minutes, sometimes in the middle of combos, which would end up getting me carded because I lost my mobility or my attack was different than I planned for spacing and such. I also don't think the insect part of the insect glaive really even matters. It doesn't do anything really functional for the bug, and I think that would be more fun for me if the buffs the bug brought buffed the bug and added to the experience, instead of just changing your essentially worthless weapon into something very usable only if you had the buffs. When I was buffed, which I had to do every hunt multiple times in order to play, the weapon was alright. The damage was awesome, the moves looked great, and you could get where you needed to go. But as soon as the buffs were gone, every ounce of fun was gone. It wouldn't come back until you spent time getting them back. Despite how much time I just spent talking about this unfun part of the weapon, I still appreciated my time playing it. C rank. Light bowgun. The light bowgun was the more fun bowgun for me. You're more agile, you have evade reloading, which was super fun, and rapid fire is much cooler than a shield mod. But the light bowgun suffers from low capacity for its magazines, making it feel like a slow weapon over the course of a hunt. Fire, fire, evade, reload is the entire hunt, and will do a good job at taking monsters down effectively, but it wasn't the most amazing gameplay loop for me in the 100-hour challenge. I know there are some incredible endgame builds with light bowgun that ramp up damage against some of the toughest monsters, but this is another case, just like the bow, where I don't really want to play 100 hours to get to the endgame builds and start having fun with the weapon. I will reiterate that the light bowgun is more fun than the heavy bowgun in my opinion. Dodging and getting around the battlefield is great, but in both bowgun cases, the ammo mechanic is kind of a drag, and the hunts are a mashing of the left click button. Most of the complexity of these weapons is in the builds and spreadsheets in the smithy, and I'm not really into Monster Hunter for spreadsheets, but I'm glad it exists for those who are. C rank. Great sword. I promise I didn't put this at the end on purpose. I randomized everything, and this is how the dice landed. I hear there are people out there looking for the greatest hit of dopamine you can find, and I've got it for you. 3 words: true charge slash. The great sword is incredible, and there's no better feeling in Monster Hunter than landing a fully charged true charge slash against a moving monster. The huge damage numbers are amazing, the stagger or knockdown you almost always get is satisfying, and you feel like a champ following up with some more true charge slash when the monster's on the ground. And this is just one way to play the greatsword, because there's a whole slew of other builds I want to get into ASAP. Elemental or status greatsword, slugger greatsword, ledge cheese greatsword, frostcraft, I could keep going. There's so much to this thing, and I want to play them all. This is also the weapon that I got to show off my game knowledge after playing through Monster Hunter World and Iceborne so many times. You shine on Greatsword when you can predict monster attacks and go for openings when they present themselves. New players may struggle with this weapon because of how slow it is, but for anyone who has some hunts under their belt, they're going to have a good time bashing monsters in the face for 4-digit numbers of damage because they waited for their opportunity to punish. I honestly don't have a downside for Greatsword except for its slow speed on attacks, but you avoid this completely by not attacking until the opportunity presents itself. Greatsword is a weapon all about patience. Bide your time, position well, then take the tails off of everything in one amazing true charge slash. S rank. And with that, my time in Monster Hunter World and Iceborne comes to a close. 1,000 hours of weapon challenges, 1,700 hours of game time total, and a ton of stories, memories, and experiences gained. Whenever you're watching this, know that you're in for a great time in Monster Hunter, no matter what weapon you pick up. I'm honestly happy and proud of every weapon I played. Let me know what you think in the comments. And if you're interested in seeing my time with each of the weapons, check out the playlist in the description and pinned comment of this video to see the 100-hour weapon challenges. And now it's time to head into Monster Hunter Wilds. Will this tier list change in the new game? I guess we'll have to find out.